Welcome back to Polly Tea with D. I hope you guys are having a wonderful week. It's actually sunny outside. It's actually sunny outside, and it's Valentine's Day, my favorite holiday. I think I say that with every single holiday, I won't lie. But I do actually like Valentine's Day. Not even because of relationships and whatever, because who the fuck cares about that stuff, but just to hang out with my friends and family and be like, I love you guys. Like, you need to tell the people that you love them while they're here, let them know. So yeah, it's just like a lovely day. Yesterday I had Valentine's dinner, had a bit of sushi with the girls, and then today we get in a loco. We're having a bit of drinks. We're going to I don't actually know where we're going, but we're gonna watch the Ireland versus Italy match. So it's not even about Valentine's today. Actually, it's more yup, the country, yup, rugby boys or whatever they be getting up to. Like, we're just gonna watch boys run around on a field and hug each other for 80 minutes. But still, it's more about the energy and the vibes. So yeah, I hope you guys have a great day today. But this is actually not even my usual recap. It's actually an interview. I interviewed my local councillor, Oisín O'Connor from the Green Party. So, yeah, I hope you guys enjoy. We're just kind of talking about we talked a lot about the Green Party actually, because before I was like, let's just do like a educational thing, like what's the council even do? But then once I read the comments, because I asked people like, what do you want me to talk about? Once I read the comments, I was a bit like, oh, it actually does make sense to ask him about the Green Party and their stances on stuff. So we do get a bit into that, how the council works, what councillors do, talk about public transport, because that is the biggest issue for me, and obviously housing, but we actually didn't really talk about housing that much, so, or at all. I don't know, can't remember. Unfortunate short-term memory loss. So you guys will just have to do, it's funny, I should have it's funny because he's my first interview ever, like, on this podcast, obviously, because there's only 7 episodes, but I don't know why. Like, I should have interviewed, practice interviewing somebody else, like a friend or something, just to get into the rhythm of things. Like, I did a practice Zoom call where we checked the audio, which my audio was fucked anyway. And I don't know why I didn't check it in the call, because once I started the call, we were just laughing and talking. And then when I listened back, I listened to 2 minutes and I was like, yeah, that sounds fine. And then I actually listened to the full episode of the interview and I was like, the audio is a bit sketch. So I need to practice that. But I'm such an awkward person, and I always forget how awkward I am until I'm in social situations. And then I was doing this interview and I was like, wait, or I was watching it back and I was like, wait, you can actually tell how awkies I am. But you know what, whatever, it's my first ever interview. I feel like I was just there to have him talk and tell us these things anyway. It wasn't really about me. So I don't know, I enjoyed it anyway, and I enjoyed the conversation, and I feel like I learned a lot. And we even talked off camera because I didn't want to be baiting out where I live. So I was exactly where I live. So I was telling him issues in my specific state, then there's this, and can you fix that? And there's only so much this guy can do. So to be fair, but yeah, I want to start interviewing people that I'm close to first. And I even have a friend who did politics with me, but I know she would rather die than go on this. I have people that I think would come on. So hopefully we can do more interviews where I can actually do a more of a back and forth, and it's not just a proper interview. Like, this was very question answer, not my input, but I still feel like it's worth it, and I hope you guys enjoy. And yeah, roll the tapes. Roll the motherfucking tapes. Just I guess a bit about you, what were you doing before you got into politics?
A lot of different things is kind of the answer. So I graduated in 2008, which was an interesting time to graduate from college. Um, and the course that I was doing at the time was full of people who were going to become accountants and solicitors. And no offense to accountants and solicitors, but that's not what I wanted to do. So I sort of didn't go straight into a career. I was a swimming coach for a couple of years. And then I did a master's in computer science. I went volunteering abroad. I came back and I started working for Google. Um, and then a few years later, then I joined the Green Party in 2019. And then in 2020, a councillor who had been elected in 2019 had to step down for professional and personal reasons. And somebody said, "Why don't you put yourself forward to, to be co-opted into the seat?" So I did, and I was chosen by our local branch to take over in the seat. So that's sort of a whistle top as to how I got started and what I was doing before. It was a little bit. It was a little bit of everything, really.
How did that process work, like, them choosing you? What do you have to go through? Is it, like, interviews? How does that work?
It's I mean, I said it's different in every party, right? So I can only kind of speak, and even it might even have changed since then, in our own party. And sometimes it's done by a local branch, So some parties might have very very different things for their Dublin branch or their Leitrim branch or wherever. But so what we had to do was we had to like send in a sort of a rationale as to why we would be a good candidate. It was myself and one other person went for the sort of the contest. So you need to get nominated by two members of the party. Then you uh, put in your rationale. You typically would have a debate. So this was like November 2020, so it was a Zoom debate. So like it's kind of a hustings with the woman who was going for the option as well. And then there was a vote. I can't remember, was the vote like was it an online or a postal vote? Because there was the both, you know, but before COVID, it probably always would have been a, in person, probably in a pub, and, like scraps of paper in a box to put the names in, which is kind of similar to how candidates get selected to run for parties anyway. It's pretty much an identical process, but it is very different because you're putting yourself forward to just take the seat, right? Like not putting yourself forward to have to go through a whole election process. So it's a little bit of a different dynamic. Um, but that's how the system is in Ireland, where we have two options rather than running a whole other election.
Yeah, and
Um,
what did you say for yourself was, like, why you would be a good person to replace the candidate?
what did I say? Oh god, it's a really good question. I suppose I just gave my experience. Like, I had experience in campaigning as well. So kind of leaned on that. I said about kind of how I work with people, how I uh, at the time and still am, like able to sort of work with people from different parties as well, which in the council is very useful because there is no really government as such. You're all kind of trying, or in theory, I'm sure we'll talk about this later, trying to work together across parties. So I said that as well. What did I say? Like I kind of, well, I said like that I can have a public profile. There are, and I've known people who are very good at policy, very good at understanding, politics and those kinds of things, and are just not are just not comfortable putting their face out there. And you know, it's not enough to be good at policy and to be good at all these things. Like you have to be like that's what you're signing up for. So well, I already had like a little bit of profile from campaigning, so I said like, listen, I'm a little bit known. People, people kind of know what I'm about already. So I'm not kind of coming from nowhere in terms of being in the public eye and that kind of thing.
And so you joined the Green Party in 2019. Why the Green Party?
Um, so why the Green Party? I at the time, the it kind of started maybe probably 2018, where I had like local issues and I was contacting all of the local councillors, like a good active citizen, um, and getting responses from sometimes none of them or sort of a stock response. Um, and I remember thinking like, well, there's an election next year, so if I want someone to respond to my emails, there needs to be somebody elected who will respond to my emails, and care about the things that I care about. So I kind of looked up who had said that they were going to be running, and Eva Dowling, who's still well, not at the time, but she was, selected to run for the Green Party in Stillorgan, which is where I was living at the time. And I said, I contacted her and I said, hi, I saw your website. I think we agree on a lot of things. Do you want any help for the election campaign? And then I met her for coffee. I said, listen, like I'm happy to help you. And so that's kind of how I got into it. So like I canvassed for her. And I believed it wasn't that I looked up, I suppose, the Green Party's policies on everything and decided that's what I'm going to, that's what I'm going to go for. And it was more just at a local level, the person locally who I felt would most align with me, I should have got in their corner.
And so you're still kind of with the Green Party, even though it was a person that you were kind of like going for, that you kind of got into it for.
Yeah, yeah. But I mean, like, it wasn't, I suppose, inconsistent with what the Green Party stood for. Like, I had a general idea, like a kind of a political passerby, that I kind of knew in general what they stood for. And I knew that, they're very strong on climate and the environment and public transport. So like I was already Green Party adjacent as well. But I think that is also like important in politics as well, is that people are people that you can get on with. You can't really, I mean, you can align with policies that are written on paper in a book or in a manifesto or whatever, but like it's actually when people are talking about them and, arguing for them and fighting for them, and that's when those things come to life. And that's a good way I would suggest to anybody who might be interested in getting into politics, is like, don't just read the, don't just read the booklet, because anyone can write a booklet. You have to actually talk to the people who are behind this.
Okay, well, in the last general election, the Green Party were kind of decimated, like from 12 TDs to 1. Why do you think that is?
And a lot of reasons. Some of them like uncomfortable for us to kind of say or talk about, to be honest. Um, the one most, the one that we were told beforehand was that if you go into government, you will get, like, this is what will happen. So I suppose there's a great "I told you so" there, that everybody said this would happen. And if I can be very, very frank, like, because we made loads of mistakes in government, that's like, honestly, that's a major, major reason. I'm not saying that we didn't, achieve a bunch in government as well, but we did make loads of mistakes and we did things that weren't right. And I suppose I say we, I wasn't at the table to make any of those decisions, and I'm say we, not that I'm handing it away from myself, but like councillors are not sort of involved in decision making when a party is in government. That's just so I would have been critical, sometimes very openly and publicly critical about what the party was doing in government, internally and externally. We didn't have what people were looking to vote for when it came to the election.
Like, what type of things do you think the Greens got wrong when they were in government?
Thinking or acting like to get our positive things through, like we did a lot of good things, like I said, thinking that to get those things through, we just have to be, not sitting there in the corner, just nodding along with Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael's stuff, because that's what we just had to do to keep them on side in government. We had to do that to get our things. It's absolutely the wrong approach, like, I was one of the people that in 2020 said, like, after a lot of thought and reluctantly said, okay, we should go into government. But I said at the time, like, we need to go into government and like still be ourselves, like not just kind of roll over when they're asking for stuff. And like, unfortunately, that's one thing that really, really hurt us.
Like, do you think they were listening to you guys at all? Like, was there like, there's conferences that happen, like Sock Dem just had theirs. Like, at these conferences, how does it work? Do you kind of voice your opinions there, or is it like you're online? Are you emailing people? Like, do you think there was kind of a forum where people could communicate to party leaders about how they were feeling, and were they being listened to, or was there even a conversation being had?
Yeah, there's always conversations being had. Yeah, like, I'm not saying that like I wasn't listened to or other people weren't listened to, but like, and it's also very easy for me to be second guessing people who were actually sitting in government, like as a TD or as a minister. Like, it's very easy for me to be second guessing. Just would like to say that, like, I can very comfortably from a distance kind of say like, oh, they should really be doing this. Um, I would say, yeah, like you mentioned, like, other parties and parties having their conferences. Um, of course, every party in the country and the world says we listen to our members, we listen to our grassroots. Every single party in the world says that, and obviously there's varying degrees of truth to parties saying that. Uh, but I don't. I I think it's much further from the message that all parties put out. I'm not kind of singling out any, but yeah, I wouldn't say it's close to the truth. I suppose for people that are in parties, when you sometimes you see a media news story and you're like, ah, okay, that's a clash between the leadership and um the grassroots or whichever. Um, so listen, I suppose that's I was listened to by some people, but yeah, and then for sure there were others who were very not interested in listening.
Okay, and do you guys have conversations about how you're going to rebuild the party, like, come the next election? If there's any plans, what are you guys hoping to do? Like, how are you gonna gain people's trust back again?
That's a great question. I mean, many of us started trying to do that before even there was any general election. It's gaining people's trust is only just by earning it. I know it's kind of very obvious truism, um, but we have to earn it, and we have to kind of look at what our sort of I suppose what our relationship is with members of the public. A lot of it is local, just kind of being, being strong locally on local issues and let that show who you are. Because just like I said, with people having manifestos and booklets and whatever, like that's all very well and good. For you actually standing up for those issues, in communities, in like where it actually matters. That there's definitely no sort of magic moment of sort of saying, we're better now or anything like that. Um, and it's like people are free to like I suppose make their choices that they don't think that we have something to offer in politics as well. Like that's definitely a possibility. But yeah, we're definitely having those conversations and like trying to put some action on the conversations as well.
And with these conversations, are you guys kinda hopeful? Is it looking good or
Yeah, I'm hopeful. I mean, I'm hopeful in some respects. I mean, worried in other respects. Like like you said, we only have one TD, so it is harder to get into the national media if you only have one TD and one senator. It's also it can be hard to I suppose it can be hard to get your message into the media if maybe the media have an idea of what kind of stories they want you in on. I mean, if I put out 10 press releases on housing and one press release on climate, like I'm fairly sure that the journalists are going to ignore the first 10 and then contact me about climate. Um, but like that's not reflective maybe of what I'm working on all the time, but maybe that's what some members of the media want. They want a Green Party person on climate. I was like, no, no, we had you on climate. Like we're not bringing you in to talk about housing.
do you feel like the media play a large part in, like, the narrative or kinda helping shape the conversations that are happening?
Oh yeah, for sure, for sure. Um, and I'm not kind of tinfoil hatting sort of conspiracy theories and mainstream media or whatever. I'm not sort of going down that route. But I mean, people who work in media are busy. Like they're flat out trying to meet deadlines, trying to put together stories, trying to, get something that will gain traction online and also that is readable on paper, all these kind of things. Like they're under pressure and they have to take quick decisions and they can't be kind of sitting there being like, oh, like have we listened to the Green Party on housing lately? Like that's not their problem. That's the reality. We only have one TD and one senator hanging around Leinster House trying to, chat to Richard Chambers, whereas other parties have a lot more. So that that presents a challenge for sure to get our message out there.
And one of the questions that I had in the that someone commented was, "Do the Green Party support Micheál Martin going to visit Donald Trump for Paddy's Day? And if so, why? Or if not, why?"
Um, I well, so is the question to the Green Party or is the question do I? Because
For I think we'll say the Green Party and also your stance as well.
I'm not 100% sure what our stance is. My stance is I no, I don't think you should go to the White House on St. Patrick's Day and see Trump. I do think you should go to the US. Like I'm not saying you should stay at home and go to the parade down in Cork or whatever. Like it is still important to, you know, try to use our influence in the world. And for better or for worse, like Washington DC is a place where we can have our influence heard on like on an international stage. Um but your man is off the wall. Like, I mean, it's just like it's not a normal situation. Like, there's loads of politicians that you can disagree with and say, oh yeah, no, you should still go and visit. Then, I mean, I'm not sure if I'm mad about Xi Jinping, but I wasn't like, oh, Michal Martin shouldn't go and visit him. Um, it's this is, I mean, I wouldn't say it's a good idea, to be honest, and especially with the back of last year with your man who went on Paddy's Day.
Do you think Michal Martin would even like? You were saying that he can spread his our influence over in Washington. Like, do you think he would do that, or like have those conversations or tough conversations about what's going on in the U.S. or how Trump has been acting recently? Do you think he'd actually do that in Washington?
Do you mean in Washington in general, or like if he was to go to the Oval Office?
Like, just if he was to go to in general, because you're saying that he should still go over to Washington, but like, what would he do there? Who would he be speaking to?
I
Or
think there's loads of different, I suppose, breakfasts and lunches and like engagements that they have usually. So I mean, from what I'm from what I know, when the Taoiseach and various ministers go to the US or Washington, they have lined up meetings with Irish friends of like whatever, American friends, Congress friends of Ireland or something like that. I mean, there's a large Irish diaspora in the US, and yeah, we don't agree with a lot of their politics. Maybe a lot of the Irish Americans are sort of embarrassing, but it's still like though all those kinds of engagements, even if you don't agree with their exact politics, it's still a good opportunity for like a very small country to have that, sort of influence. And what can they influence? I mean, I don't think they can turn around American foreign policy, that much. But to put a bit of an influence on some of these people to say, like, well, here, listen, like the perspective in Ireland is this. And, obviously, like I have a lot of problems with Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael at so many levels. But I mean, they're a lot more reasonable than almost all US Republicans, you know, and they're more reasonable than a decent chunk of Democrats in the US as well, right? So they can give a perspective that maybe those politicians aren't hearing uh, in these sort of settings in general, and it could have some influence.
okay. And just another last question about, your kind of Green Party life. People kind of use working in the council or being councillor as like a stepping stone. Do you think you'd ever kind of go and run to be a TD?
I mean, I wouldn't say no, but it's not something, it's not something that I've been, I suppose, sort of targeting as something that I want to do. Like, but I wouldn't say no to doing it at the same time. There is a sort of a stepping stone thing. Um, at the same time, like I see some TDs who have never been councillors, and like I'm like, do you do you know how anything is working? How anything works? Like sometimes I hear them talk as if in a very abstract terms, and I'm sometimes just thinking like, are you, you know, did you check with anyone how that works? Like before you went out publicly. And I'm not saying that, not like replying to their TikToks or whatever, giving eggs to them, but like I think it is useful for people to have some experience with local government before going to the job. I think that makes it can make people better TDs because they're more in tune with what's happening locally, and how local councils have to, solve problems, like flooding. um, so yeah, I think it is not I wouldn't say stepping stone for anyone to be a bad term.
So now, like, let's just talk about like the local authority and councillors and how that whole thing works. Like, what even is the local authority and how do they work with the councillors?
The two main arms of the council are the executive, who are public servants. They're the staff of the council, and the councillors, who are 40 in Dun Laoghaire Rathdown. And I suppose I'll speak about Dun Laoghaire Rathdown because that's where I represent and it's where you live as well. But for observers like who are not living in Dun Laoghaire Rathdown, it's quite similar across most counties. So we have 40 councillors in Dun Laoghaire Rathdown, and in a way, I suppose the role of the councillors is similar to like a board of directors. It's oversight, it's governance, it's approving, large spending, it's approving any major changes in policy. It's approving, long-term strategies and long-term plans. And then you have the chief executive of the council, who used to be called the county manager. So some people of a different generation might still say county manager. Um, and that chief executive has, a whole team of staff, it's like a mini company. That the chief executive has directors of different departments, and then they have their managers, and they have, you know, um, all sorts of things that they do. The staff and management of the council are meant to follow the sort of the strategies and the policies of the council that are in theory supposed to be set by the councillors. Councillors have like legally defined powers to set policies. Um, so if there is some legislation that says this policy, like this, the bylaws, any bylaws that the council has to be approved by the councillors. But there might be some strategies, like we had a thing about the trees strategy. So the council has a tree strategy that doesn't need to be voted on by the councillors. That's kind of done by the staff and the council who are experts in trees. They might present it to the councillors and say, "Here's our tree strategy. Have a look at this." And we can say, like, and I have done this, like I said, like, I'd like to see this and this and this in it. And I have been told no. It comes to the council meeting and we have to say, like, "Oh, here's our tree strategy." And then there's a little photo opportunity where the guy here like stands with the tree strategy and says, "Isn't this great?" And I'm sorry for picking at the tree strategy. It is a very good tree strategy if anybody wants to read it and copy it in their local area. I just had some feedback that I wanted to add to that. I was very transparent with the manager who was looking after it. We don't have full power over all these things. We might have influence. We have the ability to get a meeting with the manager who's looking after this strategy and talk to them about it and put our views forward. But at the end of the day, if we don't legally have the power to set certain things, we're told, we're told fairly straightforwardly that we don't.
And who chooses the chief executive?
Well, the chief executive is appointed through what's called the Public Appointments Service. So the Public Appointments Service is like a central government body that appoints people of a certain seniority across all public sector positions. So they're meant to be kind of completely politically neutral, etc., etc. The chief executive goes through an interview process with them. They still need to be signed off by the Minister for Housing, the Department of Housing also has local governments underneath it. So the Minister for Housing will sign off on the chief executive's appointment. There's also a process where the appointed CEO is like sent to the councillors for approval, but like at that stage, like the person already nearly has like a job contract. So it's not exactly like we can say, "Oh no, we're not appointing this, you know, person with horrible views or bad track record so we don't have control over that." There is provisions in the legislation for us to block the appointment. But I don't think that's ever happened.
Is it usually like,
Yeah.
you feel like those people usually are apolitical, or do you feel like sometimes it is somebody that the government kind of wants there?
I'm not sure if you can rise very highly in the public service if you're not in if you're completely apolitical. Like I'm not kind of saying like, "Oh, this public servant, that public servant is like secretly, going to Fine Gael, meetings or whatever." I'm not really saying that, but like minute everyone has their own political leanings, right? Like it's that's natural. But I would say that if you are a public servant, let's say going to work and saying follow these policies that are completely opposite to what the government are saying, you're not going to get promoted, and then that means like you're never going to become a CEO of a council or of a big body, So that's
You basically have a leg up if you are kind of like a friend of the government in a way.
yeah, you're meant to be a good public servant, like you're yeah, and not casting aspersions as people's competencies, and like there's loads of people who get elevated to like CEOs of councils who are still very very good at their jobs, and like I would say like I've worked with two CEOs and one interim CEO and DLR, and they've all been very good at their jobs. But to answer the question, if they're apolitical in general, I would say that's not possible.
And so, like, what is it that councillors can do if there's this whole other side of it that have quite a lot of control?
I suppose I split it up into three different things. One is the powers that we have. So we do have some powers that are like they're called reserved functions. So as in they're reserved for the councillors as opposed to executive functions. So we have powers like some of the powers we have are to pass the annual budget of the council. So that's like the day-to-day running of the council. It is kept separate from the capital budget, which is the these big infrastructure projects. Um, we can we can change that budget, um, by majority vote, and then we can adopt the budget by majority vote. We can pass the council development plan, and we can amend the council development plan, which is a document that has basically all the local planning rules that says where land is zoned, what kind of building you can do here, here, and here. How many, like, how much of an area is meant to be shops versus residential? Like, where are the sports pitches supposed to go? All these kind of different questions. And we have power to pass that. We have power to pass bylaws, so like parks bylaws or parking bylaws or these kinds of things.
Do you feel like councillors have a lot of power? Or do you feel like that they should have more power?
And yes, I definitely think councillors should have more power. I suppose I'm very biased in that, as in like, should I have more power? Yes, I definitely should. But I think like I mean, it's universally recognized that we have one of the weakest local governments in Europe. Uh, so other countries in Europe, the councils just have more. They have more authority. They have more. They have more remit. I think if I remember correctly, we're something like 39th out of 42 on the local sort of autonomy rankings across Europe. I think we're ahead of Russia, maybe. I can't remember, maybe Hungary, maybe we're ahead of as well. So, in great company, I suppose. It's we're a small country as well. We have to realize that, right? Like countries like Germany have a federal system where they have regions and then they have local authorities. And the regions are often the size of Ireland. So, where there's only so many layers we can insert in a small country. But yeah, for definite, we need to have more powers at local level. There is a local authority task force there at the moment that the government has set up to look at local democracy task force to look at how local government works and can it be reformed. And there's 5 representatives of councillors on that local democracy task force, and then there's public servants of various different backgrounds. And of the 5 councillors, I don't know if you could guess this without me telling you, but there's 2 Fianna Fáil, 2 Fine Gael, and 1 independent councillors representing the whole country's view of local government. So, I mean, I kind of I don't need to expand on how that's not a great idea to just like sort of handpick a few friendly voices. So, I wouldn't say I'm very hopeful for the outcome of that task force. It's but we'll wait and see. Might be some good things in it.
So my next question is just about who people go to for certain issues. How do you choose between going to your councillor for something or going to your TD for something?
And I wish this was more clear cut than it is, because it's one of the biggest, uh, like ways that things don't work, in the country. So if something is wrong, some local issue is wrong that's under the council, you can go to your TD, you can go to your councillor, or you can go direct to the council. There's a customer service team at the council. They're there. Like you can even just walk in and talk to them. They're right. You know what I mean? And you can ring them up. You can email them. There's an online form. There's loads of ways as well. But I mean, some people do report if a bin is overflowing. They'll report to their local TD, and then their local TD has 2 staff members, like sitting there in Leinster House, just ready to get your email and then like flick it on to the council, and then say, I got your bin emptied. but the person in the council that the TD or the councillor sends on your issue to is the same person in the council who would answer your phone call if you just made a phone call to the council. Do you know what I mean? So councillors and TDs love being the middle person in the whole thing of getting something solved in your local council because it gives them a chance to say, I'm not great, I got your bin emptied. But in reality, it actually would have been done quicker if you went straight to the council. Now, that's for real day to day kind of stuff. For bigger things, like some contentious issue in the area or something where there's, I mean, like all large organizations, there's different departments, and sometimes it might be falling between two departments and they can't agree. And, a member of the public is trying to get something that should be simple solved, you probably should involve your local councillor at that point. Once it starts to get a bit more, um, tricky to solve. And that's if it's a very local issue. And I suppose when I say local issue, and I know like you want to talk about buses as well, like your bus is local, but it's managed nationally. So the council don't have any control over the bus service. It's the National Transport Authority set the routes, and then they under the current model put the routes out for contracts for someone to run the routes, and that's in Dublin, either Dublin Bus or Go Ahead. In that instance, again, you could go straight to the National Transport Authority, and say something's wrong here, or make complaints about a bus service not working, um, or you can go to your local TD or your local councillor. And, again, the local TD and the local councillor will both make the complaints to the exact same person in the National Transport Authority and try to get an answer out of them. So I suppose that's where the lines aren't really well defined, because as I just described, for a council issue, you could report it to TD or a council, they'll probably still bring it. And then same for national issue. But really what's wrong there is that's when things are broken, and things shouldn't be broken. So why have a system where it suits politicians for things to be broken, because then they get lots of little jobs to run around and do, and get little pats on the back from people for getting the bins emptied. The bins should just be emptied when they're overflowing. Like, that should be part of how the public system works. Like, the bus should show up on time. It shouldn't really need like an intervention to get the bus to be shown up. Like, that's
think that maybe
and
TDs and councillors should be working together more then, or to like fix that gap, or how would you fix that gap?
I would bring in better scrutiny, like, and like accountability of public bodies um to maybe councillors and TDs. Um, but I mean, TDs should be making national legislation, and the government in 2025 made the least amount of national legislation that was ever made in the past. So maybe if they were, not running around claiming to be, emptying bins and getting bus stops fixed, they could be writing more national legislation. But at a very basic level, like, for example, on buses, I wrote to the CEO of the National Transport Authority, CEO of Dublin Bus, and CEO of Go Ahead with all the issues with public transport happening in our area. I didn't get a response from any of them. Right. So I got a response from the National Transport Authority's office uh, that's set up to respond to politicians about stuff. But like, I didn't really get a response from the people who make the decisions in any of those organizations. And I think that's wrong. Like, if the people, like people have elected me to stand up for them. And sorry, even going back to your previous question, what powers do councillors have? Like, we have a power of representation. Like, we're meant to be people's voice. People's lives are busy. Like, they have a job, carrying responsibilities, everything. Like, people are doing loads of things. They can't be like figuring out which is the right person in the National Transport Authority to be complaining to, and exactly what's the right thing. Like, that's meant to be like, we're meant to be able to do that. But there's a gap there in that the way of doing that is like, just here's an email address, and we'll respond to you within 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And like, it's fine for getting information sometimes, right? Like, I can ask, when is this happening or wherever, but it doesn't really provide any proper accountability. So, like, I would bring in a system where the CEOs of public bodies have to come in and make themselves available to local councillors for a live stream session where we get proper time to ask them questions and proper time to respond. And, like, um, it's kept constructive, obviously, but a chance to say, like, why is this not working? And why did you tell us 12 months ago that it was going to start working and it's still not working? Because it's that follow up as well that needs to happen. So I mean, I wouldn't be too hopeful for that happening. There's too much of a power imbalance between councillors and public service. So
Or like, is this something that you've brought up, or like other councillors have brought up to the council or to the local authority or the government even?
yeah, I mean, well, I suppose we brought it up, locally when we get a chance with these bodies when they come in. Like, for example, Ishka Aaron, like, I've raised it with them and said, like, there needs to be more, there needs to be a better system for hearing our broader concerns. The NTA said the exact same thing when they came in as well. I can't say that I've, put it to the ministers and said, like, why don't you do this? Fairly confident that I would get sort of an acknowledgement response, like, thank you for your email, and it would really go nowhere. Because unfortunately, like, I suppose as councillors, we have no leverage because we have very little power. So we've no real leverage to be making demands of ministers.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, just back to the buses, because I feel like that's what everybody kind of cares about or is worried about. Is just like, what is there to do then? If we're just like, you're saying you emailed the NTA and they answer to the Minister for Transport, what is it that people can do? Like, I don't know if it makes sense for people to be like themselves emailing the NTA, because if they're ignoring a councillor, they're not going to listen to like a regular person. So, what is the kind of hope for people?
Recent times, there have been protests against changes to bus services or, you know, like, unreliable bus services. And, like, the NTA have responded to those protests. So that's one way. That is one way, is to do protests, which, again, like I said, that shouldn't be the way. Like, if the bus service is not working, the NTA should fix it. They shouldn't need people to take time out of their evening or day to have to kind of walk up and down and make signs and all the rest. Like, buses running on time should not be some sort of, it shouldn't be a protest issue, right? Like, the country is not divided as to whether buses should run on time. You know what I mean? Like, everybody says they should. I don't understand why the NTA won't do it. I do think people contacting themselves does make a difference. People, yeah, if it's a lot of people on the same issue on the buses, if people were to make complaints every time the bus doesn't show up, like, it would, like, those things are tracked as well, actually. So, like, the NTA issue statistics of, like, which were the most complained about buses in the Greater Dublin area. Like, those are some ways, but I mean, none of them guaranteed success, because ultimately it's still just the NTA.
Do you work with like local TDs on this issue? Since you're like emailing the NTA, do you say whoever, Neil Richmond or whatever, can you help me out with this?
Yeah, so when I wrote to the public transport CEOs recently, I CC'd the local TDs on the email, and I think two of them responded saying thanks for your email. Um, you know, and, like, I've met both of those TDs in person since, and it's not like they came and they said, you know, I'm making progress on the bus, Oisín, it's happening. Like, that didn't happen.
But how do you feel about like the TDs that you contact not really taking it any step further, not helping you out? Because when people run here, they always say like they want to help increase public transport or make it better, and then they don't. So do you feel like they're not kind of fulfilling their promises, or is it, more of a, are they better things to be doing? Like, why is it that they wouldn't really communicate with you, or do you feel any type of way about that?
I mean, one definite reason why they wouldn't communicate with me, but they might communicate with you as a voter, right? Until they hear that you have a left wing podcast. Sorry, and politically neutral podcast. The one big reason is that if by some miracle, we get more frequent bus services or whatever, like, the TDs who I wrote to are going to be standing there at the bus stop with a photo saying, I got more buses. You know what I mean? Like, and they want to do that. They don't want to send me an email saying, "Pushing, we're getting more buses," in case I kind of try to claim credit for it. And that's unfortunately how like a lot of the politics works. Is like you know people trying to claim credit for stuff, so they're kind of hoarding information and that kind of thing.
Looks like a lot of
So
competition.
yeah, there's competition. Yeah, there's definitely competition. I mean, I've no doubt that when we get better bus services or whatever, that kind of thing will happen. That people who maybe haven't been talking about public transport a lot will all of a sudden be delighted to announce that I managed to get this. It was like, yeah, okay.
Another question actually just about the local area. Somebody asked about what are the plans for local schools in Kilternan, because I guess we have such a growing population, but like there's no schools really. Around here there's no spaces anyway.
Well, okay, so there's a few things there. So I've been working with parents in Kiltiernan to start a campaign to get a school built and to get the existing schools expanded. The decision to build the school is at Department of Education national level.
Okay.
It's not at a local level. So the person whose job it is to go and try to buy the land off that family who own the land is like a civil servant in the Department of Education. It's not somebody who like understands how badly the area needs a new school.
Mm.
It's not someone who kind of goes to goes to the shops and sees how many more people are around and how many more families are around, or who goes to church or GA club or rugby club or crash or whatever and sees the growing population and understands what's happening. Um, and the Department of Education rely on statistics, which you think like, okay, that's good. Like it's good to rely on kind of objective data, but they're relying on the 2022 census for an area that since 2022 has grown by thousands of new residents. And there's thousands of more homes either under construction, going through the planning system, or zoned and are going to be built on at some point. There's no maybe, it's definitely going to happen.
Yeah.
So, like, I have a problem with people saying, oh, we're using evidence based. It was like, yeah, but sometimes you need to take the statistics that you have and then add on to that what's kind of actually happening. So I contacted Helen McEntee when she was Minister for Education, kind of laying all this out and saying, can you let me know when the department plans to buy this land and start the new school? And she responded to say, there are no plans to build a school there. And we will continue to monitor things. And if the population grows, then we will consider it. And I'm like, if the population grows, and I shared that with people in the area, and then they were very shocked. Like, if the population grows, like, what are you?
No, like every Sunday
Not
outside my house, there's a new apartment block or a new like everywhere here. So it's kind of baffling that they wouldn't recognize that.
there's local representatives who can, who attend events with the former Minister for Education, and now there's a new Minister for Education because there was a bit of a shuffle around because past the left. Um, and they have an audience, they have a direct line to the Minister for Education and say, something needs to be done here, and it's for some reason it's not happening. Um, Obviously they are saying that they're doing it, but there's not progress being made. And then there's another issue with schools is um the expansion of existing schools. So there's a bit of a gray area here as to whether a school is meant to kind of take control of expanding or whether the Department of Education are meant to take control of the project for expanding. So a school will say, population is growing, we have a bit of space at the back, we want to build a bigger school to cater for the growing population. So like, let us expand our school. And the Department of Education might say, we'll only let you expand it under these conditions. And the school will say, like, well, we won't be able to run a school if we do that. So, for example, plant prefabs in the yard and have half the size of the yard, but with an extra 100 kids coming in next year. Like, those kinds of things are happening in our area.
Yeah, I
Um,
was in a prefab for 2 years, so yeah.
yeah, I speak to school principals, like, they're very frustrated with how, first of all, slow the whole thing is, how they feel like they had to jump through so many hoops to get basics. Like, I'm talking basics for the kids that are in their schools and for their teachers as well. Like, I don't think that the Dun Laoghaire Rathdown Council should be setting the school curriculum. Like, that's ridiculous. Like, we're not, that's just, which shouldn't be different to the curriculum in Dublin City or in Longford. But we understand which areas need schools. We understand which, what's the demand, what's the level of development happening. Like, give councils the power to purchase the lands where the school is supposed to be set up and to go through the planning process of getting the school uh, set up, and then go through building of the school, and then hand it over to the Department of Education, who can go off and hire the principal and the teachers and run a school.
Again, it just seems like there seems to be a disconnect between the council, like local councils, and the government. Like there should be some sort of like a way that you guys can communicate better than it's more than just emails to each other. There should be something like an actual conversation that's happening. I understand that the government is obviously doing so many things that they can't sit down with every single councillor and every single kind of member of local government, but there seems to be just such a massive gap that's things keep falling through.
I think it was maybe around a year, maybe it was a year and a half ago, a bit longer than that. I requested the minutes of meetings between our council planning department and the new schools section of the Department of Education, because those those conversations that you're discussing, they are on paper, they are happening. They're not happening maybe between the councillor and the Minister for Education, and that's fine. Like, if it's happening at the staff level and think that makes things work, then like I'm completely fine with that. But the minutes that came back were very, very light. It was sort of like the council planners would tell the Department of Education, "There's loads of housing being built here. We think, you know, there should be a school," and the Department of Education saying, "Okay, we'll keep an eye on it." And I know I'm being very sort of glib and, shorthand in describing those, but that was essentially what I was able to see was the conversation. So the conversations are happening, but they're within a system where there's no real
Pushback.
impetus to make it happen. Yeah, and you can have very competent people who are public servants working on things, and they're the right people to be working on things. But political accountability, which is what I am, because, like, if I stand for election again, I'm politically accountable, and other TDs and councillors are as well. That's the thing that can speed up things. I mean, it's obviously very frustrating. I don't think anybody could hear my voice and not think that I'm frustrated about this. But I mean, we carry on, and again, like, it's like you asked about the buses. What's the way? Unfortunately, it just seems like this country listens to protest.
It just said, what is the explanation on why the Green Party's manifesto in 2024 was the third best for the environment? So that's interesting.
I mean, I'll say it like Friends of the Earth, when the decision was being made in 2020 to go into government or not. Friends of the Earth lobbied the Green Party so hard to go into government, so hard, and said, "You guys have to go into government," and like really like moralizing about, like, "You guys really have to go for the sake of the climate. You guys have to go into government." And like, I do find it really interesting that then 4 years later, when they're being asked to assess parties' environmental credentials, they're looking at the manifestos, but they're not looking at the actual, like, what actually happened.
Yeah.
They're not looking at, like, okay, well, did you achieve this? I like, if they want to give us a C or whatever on our performance in government, grant. But I just, I just think it's, if we are going to be evaluating parties based on their manifestos versus based on their actions, I mean, we're just like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't see any pathway towards any kind of progress to take it as, take manifestos as sort of a real measure of any political party. Labour and the Social Democrats were the two parties that came ahead of us in this ranking, which was come up with by three people, by the way. Like, three people sat together and put up the thing. So um, they they started caring more about climate and the environment over the last 5 years. They did. Like, I'm not saying that with any shade. I'm just saying that they did, and they have a lot of members who are pushing them to do that. They have a lot of voters pushing them to do that, and like, that is great. Like, I mean, I if people want to think that the Green Party were the third best in climate, well, I mean, that's fine. Like, if that is part of actually achieving climate action, like, I kind of don't really care. Like, if if that meant that we get more climate action, that's fine. And it is a good thing that Labour and the Soc Dems are taking it more seriously in the last few years. And who knows, maybe, if people vote in the right way, there could be a government with, the first, the second, the third best climate ambition parties in the country working together. The upshot of the rankings is like who's actually in government now. The parties who've got like I don't know, a D and an E and an F on the climate rankings. So the end result really is we essentially have the worst performers
In go.
in there
Yeah.
making the decisions. So that's sort of one of the outcomes that we got from the general election.
Okay, that makes sense. I'll leave it there. I feel like we could probably there's probably so many questions, like, endlessly, but I feel like I got quite a lot. So thank you so much for
Sure. Yeah.
chat to me.
Yeah. No worries. No worries at all.
Anyway, that was that. I hope you guys enjoyed. Yeah, I enjoyed anyway. So I'm just gonna go now. I'm gonna go have a bop, gonna have a ball, and yeah, I'll see you guys next week.